This is a sad time for people who picked Soma as their Incarnon Genesis.
I need it more than any metaphor could express. If looks can't kill, maybe I'll die tomorrow, but I'll be reaching still, 'cause it's a feeling I can't let go. If looks can't kill, then maybe I'll die tomorrow. One foot on the ladder. Yeah, you know she got me climbing still. Nothing to stop me falling. Oh, who knew that looks could kill? I don't wonder why I'm breathing heavy like the weight of it's on my chest, 'cause it ain't no lie. I need it more than any metaphor could express. If looks can't kill.
What's good, folks? It's Nightmare Frame here with a new Warframe video, bringing you another Burston Incarnon video, but this time min-maxed fighting level 9k enemies. Rivenless, by the way. Let's be honest, this build isn't for the people who just want to chill and shoot the weapon. Don't worry, this video is here to just show you the optimal performance of this weapon. So if you haven't seen my Burston rundown video, do go check that out. But this build is not using any damage buffs like Roar or Eclipse, but just a simple mechanic to scale heat damage and damage over time. Let me quickly run down how heat works and scales. Heat is a powerful damage over time as it scales from the elemental percentage, base damage, crit damage, and faction damage. Oh yeah, let's not forget it strips 50% of enemies' overall armor. And
One more thing.
heat is the only element in the game that can scale infinitely. Yeah, that's right. It's because it's a linear scaling DOT, meaning it ramps up in damage and is set as a whole tick and not separated by individual ticks with their own timers. For example, if you proc bleeds, you will notice each bleed tick has its own timer, and each one of those ticks dies individually, no matter how many times you shoot to add a new instance of bleed. But that's not the case with heat. When you shoot an enemy with heat damage, it will refresh all stacks and all their timers. They will continuously keep dealing damage till they all expire at the same time, unless you keep shooting with heat to refresh them. Also, the first instance of heat application can combine and scale from several different sources of heat damage, inheriting the different multipliers into one heat stack. And this is where I introduce the heat inherit scaling. This is combining two instances of heat application for a larger boost to heat damage and damage over time. Alright, listen up. Heat Inherit uses the heat percentage of the first weapon that applied the first heat proc. And since Heat DOT double dips from faction mods for that juicy 2.4 times damage, you're going to need a faction mod on the primer and one on your DPS weapon. As for the primer, make sure you add the highest heat elemental percentage on the weapon along with the faction damage, because the first applied heat stack will have the heat DPS weapon scale from the initial applied heat stack from the primer, meaning shoot enemy with primer having the modifiers equipped to then swap to your main DPS weapon for a larger DPS. The Burston is heat in its Incarnon mode, so you're sourcing your initial heat proc from your primer. I hope you get that. So here's something that is either a bug or intended. We don't know until DE does or says something. But this is in regards to gun CO and damage scaling and how the Burston is not getting the full benefit of this mod. Galvanized Aptitude, aka gun CO, which stands for Gun Condition Overload, giving you the bonus base damage per unique status effect on the target, which only works on direct hits and not AoE, while also giving you 80% bonus status chance. So this mod ignores the bonus innate damage buff you get from the second evolution perk tree. Burston Incarnon actually only has 13 base damage on both direct hit and AoE. and you get plus 42 from the second perk. However, the direct hit from GunCo ignores that plus 42 and only scales off the original 13 base damage. But GunCo is still very useful in disruption loadouts for the heat inherit setups. It gives you that 80% status chance, and your primer can equip the secondary cucumber arcane so you can get a decent amount of procs to make it viable. Now, for this disruption run, the frame can be literally whatever you want. I just used Revenant with an armor stripping Helminth. Thorough Strike from Stynex strips both armor and shields permanently for a 200% strength requirement. And since Revenant usually goes for a lot of strength to begin with, this was the better pick. On the secondary utility weapon, you're going to use Secondary Cucumber. This arcane has a chance for you to proc additional status effects. Works best with rapid firing weapons. Wonky on Epitaph because it's AoE and isn't rapid fire. So for my utility heat inherit primer, I went with the Hystrix. It's a fun and solid choice. And if you're thinking, hey, is this for the additional heat procs for heat inherent? Then no. The force procs are just force procs. They do scale off base damage and the corresponding elements, but that's it. These additional force status procs paired with secondary cucumber to grant me as many status effects as possible to boost galvanized aptitude's potency on the Burston. Just remember to apply the first heat stack with your primer, because if anyone else primes, it ruins the damage scaling. And now onto the Burston. For the base damage, I'm using primary dexterity because for one, keeping up merciless and disruption is not efficient and you won't have your stacks up at all times. And you will waste a lot of ammo doing so. And since this is a DOT build that isn't gas or electric, Deadhead is a no-go because that triggers on direct kills and not delayed damage. Hence why dexterity is the optimal choice. Use whatever melee you want, kill 6 enemies and gain the buff. I would suggest heavy attack melees that force proc bleeds or melees that can pause their combo. Looking at the build, it looks bare bones, yet this was able to shred level 9k Demolists. Faction mod to multiply my damage and double dip with DOTs, the usual crit chance and crit damage, but with an additional crit chance mod called Argon Scope. You don't need Galvanized Scope for this as it's harder to maintain on DOT weapons, and especially if there's a lot of downtime between each Demolists. And let's not forget, Argon Scope is cheaper to slot in and gives you the initial 135% crit chance. Additional crit damage with Hammer Shot, this also provides me with status chance. Galvanized aptitude for the status chance and additional base damage on direct hits. You may notice there's no fire rate mods because I offset my fire rate on my Warframe instead. And finally, a heat mod. To be honest, this final slot does not need a heat mod, but I couldn't fit anything else of use because of mod capacity. But this mod also helped out as it allowed the normal version of Burston to also have heat damage. And not to mention, it grants me additional status chance. Little demonstration here, I'm able to kill these level 195 with the normal mode of the Burston without any dexterity buffs active, and the wrong Bane. Heat is strong, and Burston Incarnon is stronger. And those looking for the Revenant build, here you go. For the arcanes, I have Arcane Acceleration to boost my fire rate whenever I crit, and I'm always critting. And the second arcane is Energize for the large energy replenishment upon energy pickup. Revenant offers a lot of survivability and crowd control, so he was literally a brain dead pick for this level cap. Enemy radar in the aura for the consistent enemy pings. Dumped as much strength in there for his second ability. Range for Thorough Strike because range extends the reach of this ability, so I can stand at a relative distance without worrying about getting nullified by the Demolists. Vigor Swap for the additional base damage upon swapping weapons. And Rolling Guard for the 3 seconds of invulnerability, only used to refresh Mesmer Skin. This mod is important at high level gameplay. You will get randomly one-shotted as you're vulnerable during your Mesmer Skin recast. The companion does play a role in this as well. The Djinn. It will attack enemies with Thumper equipped, be semi-immortal with Reawaken, and be a host for a primary Sentinel weapon modded with the Vigilante mods. And that weapon is the Verglass. It's a beam with innate cold. The pure cold is to slow down enemies. Just make sure you have the Vigilante mods and decent fire rates. Alright folks, this is the Burston versus level 9999. This was a very simple yet chilled level cap. because this weapon was just very powerful. Didn't have to worry about too much. The only thing I had to make sure was to apply the first heat proc with my primer and get some bonus status effects so I can have Galvanized Aptitude get that bonus. Otherwise, very simple. So that has been it from this video. I do hope you've enjoyed and learned something from it. If you did, feel free to leave a like, share, and subscribe for more Warframe content, streams, and so much more. Do refer to the description. Thanks for watching, and as always, peace.